So this week we will be, the first Parsha that we learn this Shabbos is Parshas Acharei, that deals with the avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. It's also the Kriyas Hayoim of Yom Kippur for that reason. But it's also shaykh to this time of the year. And that's not only because the Daf Yomi is learning Yoma, but also because we know that the Rishonim tell us that Sfiras Omer is about preparation for Kabbalas HaTorah. The luchos that we received at Maimed Har Sinai, that we received behemshech to Maimed Har Sinai, were broken as a result of the Chet HaEgel. And it's only when it was Solachti Kidvarecha on Yom Kippur that we received the second luchos, and that's why Yom Kippur is referred to as Yom Chasu Nosoi, Ze Matan Torah in the Mishnah, in the end of Masechtes Tainis. So that as we prepare for Kabbalas HaTorah, it's also shaykh to the inyan of Yom Kippur, which is the way we reconnected with Matan Torah. So you know, the Pasuk says, "Bezois yavai arein el hakodesh, bepar ben bokor lechatos va'ayel la'oila." And then it says, "V'hikriv arein es par hachatos asher loy." That's the par poroi shel kohen gadol. V'hikriv arein es par hachatos asher loy. In this context, v'hikriv doesn't mean as it usually means hakrova al gabi hamizbeach. Over here, it just means that he should bring it near. V'chiper ba'adoi u'ba'ad beisoi. Chazal say that this v'chiper is not kaporas domim, as it would normally mean, zrikas adam, but v'chiper is vidui. This is in Pasuk Vav. And then again, we have in Pasuk Yud Aleph, v'hikriv Aaron es parachatos asher loy v'chiper ba'adoi u'ba'ad beisoi. Once again, it's kaporas vidui. And how do we know that? Because in Pasuk Yud Daled, it says v'lokach midam hapor v'hizo be'etzboi al pnei hakaporas kedma. So the Hazor, the Kaporas Domim, wasn't mentioned yet. So it must be that the two v'chipers that appear beforehand are Kaporas Vidui, Kaporas Dvorim. Now, what are the two times? So the first time it says v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi, and the second time it says v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi. So Chazal say, as Rashi says, v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi, the first time is vade olav avoinoisa v'avoinois beisoi, which means his household. The second time that it says v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi is the second vidui. Rashi says vidui sheni olav v'al echov hakoyhanim. So there are two beisois. There's the nuclear beisoi, which the Gemara says is beisoi zu ishtoi, and there's a second vidui in which the beisoi includes the entire shevet of the koyhanim. So from this we know that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur has to be married, because it says v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi, and beisoi zu ishtoi, and that's the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechtes Yoma says, Shivas Yomim koidim Yom Kippurim afrishin Kohen Gadol mi beisoi l'lishkas parhedrin u'maskinin loy Kohen acher shemo yera boy psul. Reb Yehuda oimer af isha acheres maskinin loy shemo tomus ishtoi shenemar v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi beisoi zoi ishtoi. The Chachamim say amru loim kein ein l'davar soif, if we're going to worry about so much, we're going to worry so much. But in any case, the V'chiper badoy ubad beisoy is mechayev that the Kohen Gadol should have a beisoy, meaning he should have a wife on Yom Kippur. So the Tosfos Yeshonim in Yomad Av Beis says the L'Sheni loy hoyu maskinim isho acheres. We say that we prepare a second wife just in case the first wife, the present wife of the Kohen Gadol dies, but we also prepare a second Kohen to take over just in case the Kohen Gadol dies. How about preparing a second wife for the second Kohen? Because having a wife is not leikuva. And therefore, for the present Kohen Gadol, we do prepare a wife just in case his wife dies. But for the other Kohen Gadol, for the just in case Kohen Gadol, we don't have to prepare a wife because having a wife is not ma'akiv. But then Taisa says, Vafilu ma'akve. And even if we shall say that having the beisoy is ma'akiv, l'kule hai loy chayshinan, shetamus eishes hasheni. Ki heichid loy chayshinan b'gemora l'misas hashniya. Just like we're not choishish that the Kohen Gadol will lose his first and second wife and will need to have a third. So also we don't have to be choishish kuli high. So you see that Tosfos is in doubt. Tosfos is mesupik if the having a wife on Yom Kippur is leikuva or it's just a mitzvah minha muvche. It's interesting that the Gevuras Ari in the beginning of Yoima he himself rolls out this suffix, and he didn't notice that the Tosfos Yeshonim right here talks about it. The Gevuras Ari says like this: Lo yisbarer lon, I'm not sure, b'ho de beisoy, ima akiv b'di'eved lo'yeni ala l'chatchila, u'mistaver l'choyre loymar, kiven da'hai v'chiper ba'adoy u'ba'ad beisoy b'kaporas dvorim mayri, v'loy mikaporas domim, v'hareish perik dalet tanya lo yisvado kosher. So he says, so Hilkoch ein beisoy hanemar gabay kapora zu dvorim ma'akiv. Given that Philly oka legamri lekapora dvorim ein ma'akiv. Since the source for having the beisoy is that v'chiper badoy bad beisoy, that there has to be a vidui for his wife. No, but the whole vidui we know is not ma'akiv. So since the whole vidui is not ma'akiv, it can't be that the wife is ma'akiv. That's what the Gevuras Ari says. However, the Rambam in Perik Aleph Mehilchas Avodas Yom Kippurim Halacha Beis says Avodas Kol Chamisho Esrei Behemois Elu Hakrevim B'Yom Zeh Eino Elo B'Kohen Gadol B'Vad V'chein Shar HaAvodas Shel Yom Zeh Kegoin Haktoras Shel Kol Yom V'Hatovas Haneres Hakoil B'Kohen Gadol Hakoil B'Kohen Gadol Nosui Shenemar V'Chiper Badoy U'Bad Beisoy Zu Ishtoi. So the Rambam says the nosui in defining the Kohen Gadol that we need for Yom Kippur. So it's quite clear that the nosui is liikuva, because the Rambam says that all avodas of Yom Kippur have to be done by a Kohen Gadol nosui. So just like having the Kohen Gadol is ma'akiv, who are in the having a nosui is ma'akiv. So the question is, the Gevuras Ari said, how could it be that the nosui is ma'akiv if the whole kaporas dvorim, the whole vidu is not ma'akiv? So l'chora we should say that avada, if the requirement for having a wife is that he needs to do a vidui for his wife, then it's avada true what the Gevuras Ari says, that if the vidui is not ma'akiv, the wife can't be ma'akiv. But you see, if that would be the case, he would only need to have a wife b'shas the vidui. The Rambam says that all 15 behemoths that are korev on Yom Kippur, all avodas of Yom Kippur have to be done by a Kohen Gadol nosui. Where's that coming from? Obviously, the pshat must be that from the v'chiper badoy u'ba'ad beisoy is a Gilui Milsa, that the Kohen Gadol of Yom Kippur has to be a Kohen that has a Beisoy. It's not that we need the Beisoy in order to be Mekayim, the V'chiper Badoy Ubad Beisoy, in order to do the Vidui on the Beisoy. It's a Gilui Milsa that the Kohen Gadol that we're talking about on Yom Kippur is a Kohen Gadol that has a Beisoy. And Memela Avada, it could be that even though the Vidui Dvorim is not Ma'akiv, but the Kohen Gadol Nosui is Ma'akiv, because the Vidui is just the Gilui Milsa on what type of Kohen you need. And the emes, if you look in the Gvur Sari, the Hemshech Dvorov, he says, V'akati yesh la'ayin, after he decided that the Nosui is not li'ikuva, he says, V'akati yesh la'ayin b'hoda beisoy, ikoped rachmone, b'shas kaporas poroi dafke she'eloi bayis. If all we need is that he should have a wife when he's doing the vidui on his par, Avo b'shas kaporas shnei seirim leslon bo im ein loy bayis. The whole high beisoy loy ksiv elo gabe kaporas poroi. Oy dilme akula milse kaped a beisoy shekol avodas yom kippurim tzricha liyos b'kohen gadol nosoi. Again, it's interesting that he doesn't bring the Rambam that says mefurish that all avodas of Yom Kippur have to be b'kohen gadol nosoi. But I'm saying that this suffix that he's having is really connected with his assumption that he had before. His assumption that the beisoy is just for the purpose of doing a vidui on beisoy. Mamela, he's considering that you only need to have the beisoy b'shas the vidui on the par. But if he loses his wife sometime during the day, it's not ma'akiv the rest of the avodas. Whereas if we see in the Rambam that the beisoy is liikuva, it must be that the kapora, the chiper ba'adu ba'ad beisoy is just a gilui milsa, that you need a kohen gadol nosui. So then the pshat is that you need it in all avodas hayon. Be'emes, the svara l'chayre goes in this direction because, why do we need two viduyim? The Gemara, we have two viduyim. The Gemara says, "Ma'ishno bevidui rishon, deloy omar uvnei aharon am kedoishecha, u'ma'ishno bevidui sheni de omar uvnei aharon am kedoishecha." Tone de beri b'shmol kachi midas adinoi senes. Yov mutiv yovoi zakai v'yechaper al achayev al yovoi chayev v'yechaper al achayev. So Rashi explains, "Kloimer kach yof eloimer." Only in the second video does he mention Echov HaKoyanim, because first he has to atone for himself. So the first video is for himself. The second video is for Echov HaKoyanim. Asks the Ritva, but in the first video we say that he mentions his wife, Beisoy, Zu Ishtoi. So, L'chore Yovoi Zakai, v'yechaper al hachayev, v'al yovoy chayev v'yechaper al hachayev. How does he mention his wife in the first video? Says the Ritva, ishtoi kegufay. Mamela, he could mention his wife in the first video. But you see, it's not like we have a requirement that there should be a video for his wife. In particular, he could mention his wife in the first video because ishtoi kegufay. And Mamela, she's bechlal his video. But I'm saying, since you see that it's not really a requirement b'chlal to be misvada on the wife, so it must be that the fact that we learn from v'chiper ba'adoy u'ba'ad beisoy that he needs to have a wife is just b'derech gilui milsa, that the Torah is talking about a kohen gadol that has a wife, but it's not because there's a requirement to have a vidui on the wife. In Yom Daf Yud Gimel, the Gemara has a drasha v'chiper ba'adoy u'ba'ad beisoy v'loy ba'ad shnei batim. And therefore, a kohen gadol on Yom Kippur is not allowed to be married to two wives. The Rambam in Hilchos Isurei Bia, Perik Yud Zayin, says, "Mitzvahs aseh al kohen gadol sheyiso nara psula v'chulei. The einoi noisei shtei noshim la'olam." So the Ravid says, Amar Avram loy neschavri zois asvara. Shelo yomru b'meseches yoyim el beisay Amar Achmana v'loy shnei batim. Ve'efshe shelo nesa b'shtei noshim el b'yom HaKippurim. Shelo yimoshech libo Achareihem v'yovei lidei tumah. The Rav Amagid explains the Shitas HaRambam. I'm just focusing now on the Ravid, that the Ravid, when he wants to convince us that the Rambam is wrong, and it's only on Yom Kippur that a Kohen Gadol shouldn't have Beis Batim, he goes into a whole explanation. If we say that the fact that we need a Kohen Gadol Nosui is for the kiyum of the vidui ba'ad beisai, and in this ba'ad beisai we make a drasha of v'loy shnei batim, we don't need to explain b'chlal why on Yom Kippur he can't have two wives. It's because the vidui has to be on beisai v'loy shnei batim. From the fact that the Ravid needs to apologize, needs to explain why it is that on Yom Kippur we're makbid that he shouldn't have two wives. And he says, that the din of having a wife is an independent din. And therefore, the din of not having two wives is an independent din. It's not mitzad the kiyum of the vidui. And therefore, the Ravid feels a need to explain why are we against him having two wives. And he says, now there's a fascinating Or Sameach in Hilchas Isuri B over there that says Lashitas Rabbeinu Matzonu Psul Chodesh B'Kohen Gadol, that we can invent a new paslos for a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and he says like this: She'im nishtatis ishtoi, if the Kohen Gadol's wife became insane, u'ba'ofen she'ein lo yad lishmor gita, oy shehi mishtalachas v'choizeres, the min ha'Torah einam izgareshes. So a wife like this, in this state of mind, the Kohen Gadol cannot divorce. Now says the Or Sameach v'eich yaseh, im lo yisa acheres, if he doesn't marry another wife, haloi be'inim b'yom HaKippurim v'chiper ba'adoi u'ba'ad beisoi, and v'dafke mida hava bar kapora, hoshoita lav bar kapora, so he can't be yoytze the v'chiper ba'adoi u'ba'ad beisoi with an isha shoita because she's not a bas kapora, so it's not shaykh to have a vidui for her. The either yikach acheres, if he marries another wife, ho isha achas v'lo ishtayim, u'me'ato nimtze psul chodesh b'kohen gadol, u'b'chai gavnet is battle avodas hayoyim. That if we come to a situation where the Kohen Gadol's wife became a shoita, so we have a serious problem. We can't do the avodah on Yom Kippur because he can't marry another wife because v'lo shnei batim, and he can't be mekayim the chiper badei u'bad beisoi with this wife because she's a shoita. Azoy zog the Or Sameach.
Ask a question?
Yeah, I know what you want to ask. One second. Yeah. So I'm just saying, first of all, that inasmuch as we would learn that the fact that the Kohen Gadol has to be married is for the kiyum of the vidui, ba'adoi, ba'ad beisoi, so Avada is right. And a shoita that's not a bar kapora, she doesn't qualify for being his beisoi for the v'chiper ba'adoi, ba'ad beisoi. But if we say that it's just a gilui milsa that the Kohen Gadol should have a beisoi, but it's not mihilchis the vidui dvorim, so we could say that in the shem nosui, there's no difference between being married to a sane woman or an insane woman. He still, even if she's insane, it qualifies for the Kohen Gadol being considered a nosui. And the vidui doesn't have to be on the wife. It's just a gilui milsa that he needs a wife. Now Yeshua Yor wants to say that it's memanavshach. Because why was the Or Sameach? No. Why was the
I'm just questioning this idea that she's not a bar kapara.
No, I just want to say, it says, now if you don't want to say it, I'll say it. Because the Or Sameach l'chari says himself minei obey. Because inasmuch as he holds that the insane wife is not a beisoi, he must be holding that what we're looking for is the v'chiper bad beisoy. No, oy bazoi, why can't he marry another wife? Why is that going to be considered shnei batim? I mean, it's only one bias for the v'chiper. And so mimanavshich, l'chayra, we could tie that what the Or Sameach says doesn't hang together la'anios da'atenu. But what did you want to say?
No, I'm just questioning that she's not a bar kapara. In other words, for actions that she does while she's a shaita, she's not a bar ancient. But
you mean
but
since
theory,
she was once,
she still could require kapara for
since she was once sane.
Vice dice. I mean, she's married.
Vice dice, right? I hear that I don't know. That I don't know. You're right. The insanity plea is only if you were insane b'shas ma'aseh. I mean, if a shaita doesn't become potter from what he did when he wasn't a shaita, you're right. In any case, there's another question. The Gevuras Ari in the beginning of Yoima asks, we have a brayse Masechtes Kedoshim that says on Daf Chof Beis, Lagabi the Ritzias Oizen of the Eved Ivri. It says in the brayse, Tanya, Loi Isha Ubonim. If the Eved has a wife and children, the Rabbi Ein Isha Ubonim, the Odoin doesn't have a wife and children, Einoy Nirza, then you can't be Mekayim the Ritzia. Shenemar ki ahevcha ve'es beisecha. It says that the Eved, in order to require Ritzia, he has to be ahevcha, he has to be oihev the Odoin and his bias. So you see that the bias is koilol children. We learned that he has to have, that the Odin has to have bonim. So asks the Gevuras Ari, so why is it that over here we only require the Kohen Gadol to have a wife? Why don't we require him to have children? Because it says v'chiper badoi u'ba'ad beisoi. And Be'emes in the Ma'arit, in Masechtes Kiddushin over there, Daf Chof Beis asks the same question. And in the Mishnah Melech in Hilchos Avodim Perek Gimel, and the Ma'arit Ma'ai Taima says that the Brayse Masechtes Kiddushin that mentioned bonim is lav dafke. It's not really true. You don't need bonim because we see from Masechtes Yoima that bonim are not included in Beischa. So says the Tosfos Harosh actually also in Kedoshim. But in the Re'im in this week's Parsha, he names on Faket that by the Kohen Gadol he has to have children, even though it's not mentioned in the Gemara. And he says, because you see from the Brayse in Kedoshim, that bias is also children. And so also it seems in the Kiryas Sefer, in Perek Beis, Mehilchas Avodas Yom Kippurim, that the Kohen Gadol has to have children on Yom Kippur. Now, the Gevuras Ari says, he says like this, that if it's true that bonim are included in Beisoy, so who adin b'nei bonim? Because we always say that b'nei bonim harei heim ke bonim. Now asks the Gevuras Ari, the pasuk in Parshas Acharei is talking about Aaron HaKohen. And if we're going to say that Beisoy of his first vidui includes bonim and b'nei bonim, so that already included all the kohanim, because all the kohanim at that time were either bonim or bnei bonim of Aaron. So what's the second vidui about for all the kohanim? All the kohanim are already included in the first vidui, which is ba'ad beisai, which includes not only his wife but also his children and his children's children. Azoy frag the Gevuras Ari. Okay, so I just want to say that according to what we're saying, that the need for a married kohen is not in order to be mekayim the vidui ba'ad beisai, but that ba'ad beisai is a gilui milsa on what kind of kohen you need. So it could be that even if beisai in the parsha of Eved includes the children, but in this context, where we're talking about a definition of the kohen, the kind of kohen that you need, it could be that only an ishtoi is a dimension, is a definition of the kohen. Whether he does or doesn't have children doesn't define him. And therefore, even if Beisoy in Hilchos Avodim Ahevcha ve'ez beisecha includes the children of the Yodin. Maybe over here it doesn't include. It's not mechayiv that the kohen should have children because having children doesn't define the kohen. Now, if you're going to ask who was Aaron misvada for in the second, so I'm saying that be'emes the children are taka miskaper with the first vidui because it is beisai, but it's not a requirement that the kohen should have children. Now, if the children are beisai and the miskaper with the first vidui, so is the gvuris ari. So who is the second vidui for? Aaron, his children, and his children's children were all the kohenim, but that's not necessarily true, according to Rav in Zvachim Daf Kuf Aleph that says that Moshe Rabbeinu was a kohen for all 40 years. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was a kohen that wasn't Aaron's son or son's son, and Memela, the second vidui, Lefizeh would be for Aaron. In any case, I'm saying all these three issues are totally habaha. The Gvuras Ari assumed that having a wife is not leikuva, and he assumed that you only have to have a wife b'shas levidui, and he has the kasha that the Kohen Gadol should have to have children. I'm saying all this is based on the understanding that having the beisoy is a requirement for the kiyum of the vidui of the chiper badoy ubad beisoy. If that's so, it can't be that the vidui is not ma'akiv and the wife is ma'akiv. If that's so, you only need to be married b'shas the vidui. And if that's so, if bonim are included in beisoy, he should have to have bonim. But if we say that it's just a gilui milsa about what kind of kohen we're talking, so it could be that the vidui is not ma'akiv, but nevertheless the wife is ma'akiv. It could be that having a wife is ma'akiv and all avodas of Yom Kippurim, like it says in the Rambam. And it could be that even if children are included in the beisoy, but it's not included in the ma'akiv that we say that a kohen gadol has to have a beisoy, because having to have a beisoy is only in as much as the beisoy defines the kohen, whereas having the children is not a definition in the kohen. In any case, so we see that on the holiest of holy days, on Yom Kippur, when the kohen enters the holiest of holies, and the kohen gadol is the holiest Jew, we see that the Torah is makpid that he should be married. And befrat, according to what we're saying, that it's not because the kiyum of vidui for his wife, but it's an independent issue that the kohen gadol should be married on Yom Kippur. Avada, that needs to be understood. Why is it so important that he be married, and why is it so important that he be married on Yom Kippur in particular? So that mistama has to do with the fact that Yom Kippur is a day of atonement for the Chet HaEgel. Salachti kidvarecha. The Chet HaEgel, we know, was in a sense a chazorah on the Chet Eitz Hadas, and we know that Adam Arishan, when he was created, Hashem says, "Lo toiv heyoisa Adam levadoi esa lo eze kenegdoi," and as Rashi says, why is it lo toiv heyoisa Adam levadoi? Because shelo yoimru, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a yochid be'el yoinim and man is a yochid b'tachtoinim. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol doesn't have a ben zug who adin, the Adam doesn't have. No, it's avada the pshat that Rashi knows that, because even though the Gemara says that they asked Eliyahu, I mean, what's the pshat? Why is it? How is it? How is Eicha Isha is Rosoi LaAdam? So he said, what do you mean? Adam mevi chitim, klum chitim koises. The man brings chitim from the field. Does he eat chitim as is? He brings pishton. Does he wear the pishton as is? She makes it into bread. She makes it into clothing. So avada, she's an eze kenegdoi. But Rashi holds that doesn't explain the loy toiv heyoisa adam levadoi, because because it doesn't say over here, Loi toiv le'odom heyoy soy levadoi, that it's not good for man to be levadoi. It says Loi toiv. It's objectively Loi toiv. And it must be so, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man, and he could have created man in a way that he should be self-sufficient, and he shouldn't need a wife as an Eze Kenegdoi. So true, the Gemara explains how in the real world the wife is an Eze Kenegdoi. But the Gemara is not dealing with the question of why Hashem created man in a way that it should be Loi Toiv, Heyois Adam Levadoi. And the answer to that is because it's objectively Loi Toiv, because if man would be self-sufficient, he would become self-absorbed. And there would never be a crack in his ego where the light of the Rebbeinu Shalom would shine in. He wouldn't be exposed to anything beyond himself. And therefore it's Loi Toiv, Heyois Adam Levadoi. And therefore Hashem created him in such a way. And therefore he created him in a way that he's needy, and he needs to have an Eze Kenegdoi, and then he created the Eze Kenegdoi. So, it says, Al Kain Yazoi Vishes Ovi Vesimoy, V'dovak Be'ishtoi. The word Dveikus is not such a common word in Tanakh, and it always appears in the context of Dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It does say by Rus, the Rus Dov Kaba, but that Dveikus is really in the sense of Amech, Ami, Ve'eloikayech, Eloikoi. So the truth is that the V'dovak Be'ishtoi is really a Mavoi to Dveikus in the Rebbeinu Shalom, because once a person exits his self and he's V'dovak Be'ishtoi, that allows him to be Ledovka boy in the Rebbeinu Shalom. And man's nefila came by separating from the Eze Kenegdoi. The Nochosh says, B'shosha bo Nochosh al Chavo hitel bazuamo, and Rashi says, Kishenosam lo eitz alecho min ha'eitz bo oleho. The Ksiv HaNochosh hisiani loshin nisuin. So he created a period between the husband and wife, and as we see, Adam Arishan says, "Isha asher nasato imodi hi nosna li min ha'etz va'oichal kan kofar b'toiva." So the Adam Arishan became mentally and emotionally separated from his wife, and that's, in other words, he was living the illusion of toiv levadoi, the illusion of yochid b'tachtoinim, which blocks out the Yochid Bo El Yoinim. Now Yisrael Sha'amdu Al Har Sinai, Poskazu Amoson, and the Abudraham says that was before Matan Torah, the Amida, the Hachona for Matan Torah. And how's that? Because Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Ahar, Rashi says Keish Echad Belev Echad. So through that Achdus, they got rid of the Zuhama of Levadoi, the Zuhama of Yochid B'tachtoinim. Through the Kulanu Ke'echod, we were Zoichet to the Borcheinu Avinu, and that bracha is Ba'or Panecho, Ki Ba'or Panecho Nasata Lanu Hashem Elokeinu, Toiras Chaim. So Matan Torah comes about through the Ke'echod, which is when people exit their selfish self. But the Keish Echad B'leiv Echad didn't hold up for very long. Then there was a Koil Milchama B'machane, and everybody went back into his Levad. And then they prefer the Egel over Zeh Moshe Ha'ish. And why is that? Because Vayitzer Hashem Elokim min ha'adama kol chayes hasoda v'chol oif hashamayim v'yovei al ha'adam lirois ma yikra loi v'chol asher yikra loi ha'adam nefesh chaya hu shemoy v'yikra ha'adam shemois l'chol ha'behema v'lo oif hashamayim v'chol chayes hasoda u'la'adam loi motza eze kenegda. In other words, the behemoths, the oifis, the chayes, they are not capable of bringing man out of his levadoiness. They don't challenge his yechidus, and therefore, when the zuama of levadoi came back, Klal Yisrael chooses a Yelchul Lefanenu that should be Betavnis Shor Oichel Esev, because that kind of leader doesn't challenge their self. Lahavas Hashem Elokecha L'shmoya B'koyel L'dovka Boy, zog the Pasuk. So Chazal say in Ksubas Daf Kuf Yud Aleph, V'chi Efshel L'odom L'dovik B'shchina, Elo Kol HaMesi Bitoy L'talmid Chochem, V'oisa Pragmatia L'talmidei Chachomim Min Chosav Ma'ala Olav HaKosav Ki'ilu Mizdabik B'shchina. So Dveikus in the Shchina is only made possible through Dveikus in a real, tangible Talmud Chochem. Because the Dveikus in a real Talmud Chochem, which is a bus of Edom, and in that context, there could be Kinna, Sinna, Tacharus, that takes a person out of the constraints of his selfishness and his being self-absorbed. And when a person exits that selfishness, he becomes exposed to what's beyond himself, not only the Talmud Chochem, but Hecher and Hecher until the Rebbeinu Shalom, until he can be Davik B'Shchina. So it's only through the Dveikus in Zeh Moshe Ha'ish that we were Zoichet to V'yaminu B'Hashem uve Moshe Avdoi. Just like the Chinuch explains that the Midah of HaKoras HaToiv in Mitzvah Lamed Gimel, he says, that when a person instills in himself the Midah of HaKoras HaToiv through being Makir Toiv to his parents, Ya'ale mimeno lahakir Toivas HaKel Baruch Hu, shehu sibosai v'sibos avoisav. You can't begin with the abstract HaKoras HaToiv to an abstract being. You can't begin with HaKoras HaToiv for the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Chinuch says the way a human being can have HaKoras HaToiv to the Rebbeinu Shalom is only through first having HaKoras HaToiv for his parents. It has to be something real and something challenging, because having HaKoras HaToiv to the Rebbeinu Shalom, is not challenging. But having HaKoras HaToiv to your parents is challenging. Al derech zeh, the Dveikus in a Talmud Chochem is challenging, and therefore it takes a person out of himself, and therefore it allows him to be Davik in the Shechina. So, from the kilkul of Hanochosh Hisiyani and the complaint of Ha'isho Asher Nasata Imodi, man fell back into the bubble of Levadoi, and the Avodas HaTikun was given to us over the Doris. Yisrael she'omdu al Har Sinai, ki ish echad b'leiv echad, they were zoichet ta'ato harei soladas, ki Hashem ulei kimenoi bilvadoi. Because when a person is not levadoi, he becomes included in the ein oid milvadoi. But then again, when they were mekalkal with the koil milchama v'amachaneh, and they lost their faith in Zeh Moshe Ha'ish, part of that zuhama of levadoi came back. And therefore, the kates, slicha u'mechila, that was Nikva L'Doris, is, as we say in the Piyut on Yom Kippur, after the Seder Avodah, that Yom Kippur is a Yom Simas Ava Vereus, Yom Azivas Kina V'Tacharus. In other words, that's the restoring the koima of the Adam as K'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad. Ish ve'isha zachu shchina shuri b'neihem, because through that kesher, the kavodik kesher between man and his kenegdoi, man is not levadoi, and he breaks out of himself, and he becomes exposed to hashras hashchina, shchina shruya b'neihem. And therefore, on this day of Yom Kippur, which is the day of being mesakin, the tzuras odom, of nase odom b'tzalmeinu kidmu seinu, we have a kpeda that the Kohen Gadol has to be married. The chipre badri bad beisei zuishta, because only in that sense is he exposed to the ein oid milvadoi on this day of Yom Chasunosoi v'Yom Simchas Liboy. And just like in the Hasoras Hazuam on Sinai, there had to be first an al tikshu elisha in order to restore the kesher and make it the proper type of kesher, and only after that, shuvu lochem la'oho lechem. So also in the Avodas Hayom of Yom Kippur, when mafrish Kohen Gadol mi beisoi, and according to one man Da'amar, in Yoma, the source is from Matan Torah. But after the v'chipre b'adei u'ba'ad beisoi, in the Avodas Hayom, We're melavin oisoi ad beisoi. So that's the importance of a Kohen Gadol nosui b'yoyim Kippurim. Okay, Rabbi Isai,